Emily Carter always thought her life was the kind of story people envied. At 32, she carried herself with the quiet grace of someone who believed she had it all figured out. Her husband, Daniel, was successful, charming, and admired by everyone they knew. Their suburban home stood like a picture from a lifestyle magazine, with its freshly painted shutters, manicured lawn, and warm glow that spilled from the windows every evening. Friends often remarked how perfect the two of them looked together, a couple who seemed untouched by the messiness that plagued other marriages. Emily would smile, half flattered and half proud, because deep down, she believed it too. She thought she had built something unshakable, a life stitched together with love, trust, and the kind of comfort many dreamed of but never truly achieved. Her mornings began with small rituals that gave her comfort. She'd wake to the smell of coffee brewing. Daniel always made sure to prepare it before heading out. Their breakfast table was filled with laughter, light conversations about their plans for the day, and a quiet intimacy that seemed effortless. Emily loved the way he looked at her sometimes, his eyes warm and steady, as though she was the anchor in his chaotic world. It was those moments, simple and fleeting, that reinforced her belief that their love was unbreakable. She wore her wedding ring like a badge of honor, a reminder of the vows they had exchanged and the promises they had kept. Or so she thought. At family gatherings, Emily played the role of the adored wife. Daniel's parents loved her, their friends admired her poise, and she basked in the unspoken pride of being the woman who had captured his heart. When conversations turned to troubled relationships or cheating scandals, Emily would silently thank the universe for sparing her from such pain. She believed she had found the rare kind of marriage that could withstand time and temptation. Daniel had once told her, on their anniversary, that she was the best decision he had ever made. His words had imprinted themselves on her soul, and Emily carried them like a shield, never doubting for a second that they were true. Life outside their marriage seemed to mirror that same perfection. Emily had a small circle of close friends who admired her strength and loyalty. She had built a career for herself, one that balanced her ambitions with her role as a supportive wife. Their finances were secure, their future mapped out in the form of savings, investments, and plans for vacations that stretched years ahead. She imagined herself growing old with Daniel, sharing quiet mornings, and reminiscing about the life they had built. In her mind, there was no shadow dark enough to dim the brightness of the world they had created together. Even on the nights when Daniel worked late, Emily never questioned it. She would curl up with a book, or sometimes sit by the window, sipping tea and waiting for the sound of his car pulling into the driveway. When he walked in, tired but smiling, she would greet him with a kiss and a warmth that came from genuine love. She had no reason to doubt him, no reason to believe that anything in their carefully constructed life was anything less than real. Her heart was full, her trust unshaken. Emily's friends often told her she was lucky. They envied the way Daniel looked at her during dinners, the way he seemed to prioritize her above everything else. Some even confessed that they wished their husbands were as attentive. Emily never boasted, but deep down, she agreed. She was lucky. She had fought through the uncertainties of young adulthood, the struggles of early marriage, and she had come out on the other side with a love that appeared stronger than ever. She carried this belief into everything she did. When she decorated their home for the holidays, she imagined the traditions they would pass down to their future children. When she attended work events by his side, she felt proud to be the woman standing next to him, the one who knew him better than anyone else in the world. To her, Daniel wasn't just a husband. He was her partner, her safe place, her greatest source of joy. But behind that belief lingered small moments she never paid attention to. A phone call cut short when she entered the room. A receipt tucked away in his wallet for something he claimed was a business expense. A slight hesitation in his voice when he explained why he missed dinner. Emily dismissed them all, convincing herself they were insignificant, not worth shattering the peace she cherished. Trust, she told herself, was the foundation of their marriage, and she refused to be the kind of woman who doubted her husband over trivial things. She had seen other marriages crumble under suspicion, and she promised herself she would never allow paranoia to taint what she and Daniel had. Her heart chose to see only the good. It clung to the laughter, the warmth, the shared dreams. Emily believed in the life they had built with such certainty that she silenced the small whispers of doubt before they could grow louder. She saw Daniel as her forever, her perfect match, the man who completed her world. And as long as she held on to that belief, she thought nothing could break her. Strange late-night calls began to unsettle Emily in ways she couldn't quite explain. At first, they seemed harmless, Daniel's phone buzzing after dinner, his hand casually sliding it off the table before anyone could glance at the screen. He'd smile, kiss her on the forehead, and assure her it was just work. Emily believed him, because why wouldn't she? He had always been dedicated to his job, often dealing with clients in different time zones. But soon, the calls became more frequent, more persistent, always at odd hours when most people would be asleep. Emily tried to ignore the knot that tightened in her stomach every time his phone lit up, tried to dismiss the unease as nothing more than her imagination running wild. One night, as she lay curled beneath their soft duvet, the shrill vibration of his phone jolted her awake. It was 2:13 a.m. Daniel, half asleep, reached for it with a practiced swiftness that made her blink. He turned on his side, back facing her, voice low and hushed. Emily couldn't make out the words, but she felt the cold weight of suspicion press against her chest. Who was calling him at this hour? Why was he whispering, as though guarding the conversation from her ears? She lay still, her breathing slow and steady, pretending to sleep while her mind raced with questions she wasn't ready to ask. Over the next few weeks, she noticed other shifts in his behavior. Daniel, who once left his phone casually lying around, now carried it everywhere, even into the bathroom. When it rang during dinner, he would silence it instantly, sometimes forcing a strained smile before steering the conversation elsewhere. Emily told herself it was stress, maybe a big project that demanded his attention, but the lies she fed herself felt thinner with each passing day. Her intuition screamed that something was wrong, yet her heart clung desperately to the idea of their perfect life. Her unease deepened when Daniel began working late more often than usual. Just a few more hours, he'd say, dropping a quick kiss on her cheek before rushing out the door. She would stand by the window, watching his taillights disappear into the darkness, convincing herself that this was just another season of long nights and hard work. But then she began to notice the small details, the faint smell of perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his jacket, the way his tie would sometimes be loosened as though someone else's hands had been there before he walked through the door. Emily tried to brush it off, but the doubts began to creep into her daily thoughts, poisoning her sense of peace. She found herself staring at the phone when he wasn't in the room, wondering if she should check. She'd reach for it, her fingers trembling, only to pull back at the last second. Trust was the backbone of their marriage, she reminded herself, and she refused to become paranoid. But every time the phone buzzed in the dead of night, her resolve weakened, her pulse quickened, and she lay awake imagining conversations she couldn't hear. Then came the moment she couldn't ignore. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Daniel's phone lit up on the coffee table. A single name flashed across the screen, unknown. His hand darted for it, almost too quickly, his face pale for the briefest second before he forced a laugh and silenced the call. Emily caught the flicker of guilt in his eyes, the kind of look he couldn't disguise no matter how hard he tried. The room suddenly felt colder, the movie nothing more than background noise to the storm raging inside her. She wanted to ask who it was, wanted to demand an explanation, but fear chained her tongue. Fear of the answer, fear of cracking the glass shell of perfection she had built her life around. The pattern repeated itself for weeks, calls from hidden numbers, text messages he guarded like treasures, late nights that stretched into early mornings. Daniel grew more distant, distracted, his laughter less genuine, his touch less tender. Emily felt the shift, the widening gap between them, and no matter how tightly she tried to hold on to him, he seemed to slip further away. The house that once felt warm and safe began to feel like a stage, every smile rehearsed, every word a performance hiding something darker beneath the surface. Emily's heart ached with confusion. Was she imagining it all? Was she letting insecurity destroy the trust they had built? Or was the truth far uglier than she dared to admit? Each time she looked at him, she saw the man she loved, the man she had built her life around. But lurking behind his familiar eyes was a stranger she didn't recognize, a stranger who whispered into phones at midnight and carried secrets in silence. The more she tried to ignore the signs, the louder they became. The more she tried to convince herself nothing was wrong, the more the lies screamed at her from the shadows. Emily didn't know it yet, but those late-night calls were the beginning of the unraveling, the first cracks in the illusion of perfection she had clung to for so long. Emily had always trusted Daniel with their finances. From the very beginning of their marriage, he had taken the lead in handling their accounts, investments, and bills. He was meticulous, organized, and always assured her that everything was under control. She never questioned him, why would she? He had built a successful career in finance, and Emily took comfort in knowing their future was secure in his capable hands. But the first real crack in that security appeared on an ordinary afternoon when Emily stopped at the bank to deposit a small check from her freelance work. As she waited for the teller to process the deposit, her eyes drifted to the screen. For a split second, she noticed something odd, a secondary account linked to Daniel's name. She blinked, convinced she had imagined it, but when the teller clicked through the menus, there it was again, an account she had never seen before. Curiosity pricked at her, but she stayed silent, not wanting to draw attention. Still, the sight of it clung to her mind like a burr she couldn't shake off. That evening, as Daniel laughed and told her about his day, she found herself staring at him differently, wondering what other things he kept hidden. Days later, when he left his laptop open on the kitchen counter, she hesitated but couldn't resist the pull of her suspicions. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad, her heart racing in her chest. She navigated carefully, scrolling through financial documents that seemed routine until her breath caught. There it was, the hidden account. Her eyes widened as she studied the transactions. Large sums of money, withdrawals and transfers, made out to places she didn't recognize. Boutique hotels. High-end restaurants in parts of the city they never visited. Jewelry stores that she had never stepped foot in. Each line on the statement felt like a knife to her chest, cutting through the fragile veil of trust she had so desperately clung to. Emily's mind reeled. Why would Daniel need another account? Why hadn't he told her about it? And more importantly, why was he spending so much money in secret? She tried to rationalize it at first. Maybe it was related to work, maybe it was an investment opportunity he hadn't had the chance to explain, but the excuses rang hollow in her ears. The truth whispered louder than her denial. These weren't the habits of a man devoted to his wife. These were the habits of a man living a double life. She remembered their anniversary just a few weeks earlier, the diamond bracelet he had given her, the way he had kissed her hand and told her she was his everything. The memory soured instantly. Had that gift been purchased to mask his guilt? Was it a distraction, a shiny object meant to blind her from the shadows creeping into their marriage? Her stomach twisted as she imagined him walking into those stores, smiling at another woman the way he once smiled at her, using the money that was supposed to be theirs to fuel his betrayal. Nights became unbearable after that discovery. Emily would lie awake next to him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, while her mind replayed the transactions over and over like a broken record. She imagined him sliding a card across the counter, laughing in the glow of candlelight dinners that weren't shared with her. She pictured him slipping jewelry onto another woman's wrist, whispering the same sweet lies he once told her. The images haunted her, stealing her peace, filling her with a mixture of rage and sorrow she didn't know how to contain. She wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but fear held her back. What if he admitted it? What if every suspicion was true? She wasn't ready to hear the confirmation, wasn't ready to watch her carefully constructed life collapse under the weight of betrayal. So she stayed silent, watching him closely, pretending nothing had changed. But inside, her heart was splintering, each hidden transaction driving the wedge deeper between them. The more she investigated, the more evidence piled up. Emily became an expert at subtle snooping, checking receipts tucked away in his jacket, scanning statements he carelessly left in his office drawer, memorizing account numbers she knew she shouldn't know. Each discovery was another piece of the puzzle, a picture she didn't want to see but couldn't look away from. She had stumbled into a labyrinth of lies, and with every step, the walls closed in tighter around her. Emily realized that the perfect life she thought she had wasn't perfect at all. It was a facade, a carefully crafted illusion Daniel had built to keep her blind. Behind the dinners, the vacations, and the tender words, there was another world, one she wasn't invited into but was paying for in silence. She felt betrayed not just as a wife but as a partner who had given her trust without hesitation, only to learn that the man she loved was funding secrets behind her back. The knowledge burned inside her, but she swallowed it, hiding her turmoil behind forced smiles and empty laughter. Daniel didn't know that she had seen through him. He didn't know that the woman he thought he was deceiving was already steps ahead, quietly gathering the fragments of truth. Emily's silence became her weapon, her watchful eyes her shield. And though her heart was breaking, a part of her began to awaken, the part that would no longer sit quietly while he dismantled her life piece by piece. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning, one of those rare days when Emily allowed herself to relax. She had gone into town to pick up fresh flowers from the little shop she loved, the one with the bell that chimed sweetly every time someone walked in. The air smelled of lavender and roses, and for a moment, she felt a flicker of peace. But that peace shattered the moment she stepped outside and noticed a woman standing by her car. The stranger was striking, with sharp features and a confidence that made her stand out in the crowd. She wasn't smiling, but her eyes locked onto Emily with an intensity that made her uneasy. Emily froze, her grip tightening around the bouquet. The woman stepped closer, her heels clicking against the pavement, and said softly, almost too calmly, "You don't know me, but you should." Confused, Emily frowned. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" The woman tilted her head, studying Emily as though she were inspecting a piece of art. "No. But I know Daniel." The name dropped like a stone into Emily's stomach, the air catching in her throat. She tried to mask her reaction, forcing out a careful, "And how exactly do you know my husband?" The woman gave a small, bitter laugh, the kind that carried both mockery and pain. "Let's just say he hasn't been as honest with you as you think." Emily felt the ground sway beneath her feet. She wanted to dismiss this stranger, to brush her off as a liar or someone with the wrong idea, but there was something in her tone, something cold, certain, that made denial impossible. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she tried to steady her voice. "I don't know what you're implying, but if you have something to say, then say it." The woman's smile was sharp, almost cruel. "Oh, I will. But not here." She slid a card into Emily's hand, her fingers brushing against hers with deliberate weight. "When you're ready to hear the truth, call me. Just know, it's worse than you think." And just like that, she walked away, leaving Emily standing on the sidewalk with flowers in one hand and the card in the other. Her palms were clammy, her chest tight, the world around her suddenly dimmer, heavier. She stared at the simple white card, no name, just a number scribbled in neat handwriting. For the rest of the day, Emily couldn't focus. Daniel came home later than usual, whistling as he set his keys on the counter, acting as though everything was perfectly normal. She studied him carefully, every movement, every smile, searching for cracks in the mask. He kissed her cheek, asked about her day, and Emily forced herself to answer as though her mind wasn't burning with questions. She couldn't bring herself to mention the woman. Not yet. Not until she knew more. That night, lying in bed beside Daniel, Emily turned the card over in her hand under the soft glow of the lamp. She wanted to tear it apart, throw it away, convince herself it meant nothing. But something inside her whispered otherwise. The mysterious woman's words replayed in her head, it's worse than you think. Sleep refused to come. She stared at Daniel's face, peaceful in slumber, and felt an unfamiliar chill crawl through her veins. Was this the man she thought she knew, or a stranger who had been weaving lies while she played the role of the perfect wife? The thought terrified her, but even more terrifying was the possibility that the woman was right. The next morning, Emily found herself dialing the number before she could talk herself out of it. The phone rang once, twice, then clicked as the same cool, steady voice answered. "I was wondering when you'd call," the woman said, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. Emily swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "Who are you?" There was a pause, heavy with meaning, before the woman replied. "Someone who knows the side of Daniel you've never seen. Meet me tomorrow. Alone." Emily's hand shook as she ended the call, her chest constricting with fear and dread. She knew her world was about to change, that the truth waiting for her on the other side of that meeting would tear open wounds she didn't know she had. But what she didn't know yet was that the stranger's arrival wasn't just a warning, it was the spark that would ignite everything. The following day felt like a blur for Emily. Every tick of the clock sounded louder than usual, dragging her toward a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to face. She had agreed to meet the mysterious woman at a quiet cafe on the edge of town, far enough from the places she and Daniel usually visited. It was the kind of spot where people came to disappear into their coffee cups, where conversations melted into the low hum of background chatter. Emily arrived early, her nerves so raw she could barely sip the latte she ordered. Her fingers traced circles on the side of the cup as her mind replayed the woman's haunting words, "It's worse than you think." When the woman finally walked in, Emily felt her chest tighten. She was dressed impeccably, confidence radiating from her with every step. Sliding into the seat across from Emily, she leaned forward with a calmness that made Emily's pulse race. "I wasn't lying," she began, her eyes locking onto Emily's with unnerving certainty. "Daniel isn't the man you think he is. He's been lying to you for years." Emily clenched her jaw. "If you have proof, show me. Otherwise, stop playing games." The woman smirked, as though she had been waiting for those exact words. From her bag, she pulled out a slim folder and placed it on the table. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for it. Inside were photographs, grainy at first, then painfully clear. Daniel, her husband, sitting across from the same woman at an upscale restaurant. Daniel holding her hand. Daniel leaning in, his lips brushing her cheek. Each image was like a dagger twisting deeper into Emily's chest. "I didn't want to believe it either," the woman said quietly, her voice laced with bitterness. "But he's been living two lives. With you, and with me." Emily's breath caught, her eyes blurring as she flipped through the photos. She wanted to scream, to deny what was staring back at her, but the evidence was undeniable. She wasn't looking at a stranger's fantasy, she was looking at her husband's betrayal, printed in cruel detail. "Why are you showing me this?" Emily whispered, her voice breaking. "Because I was just like you once," the woman replied. "I believed his promises, his lies. He told me you were the one holding him back, that you didn't understand him, that he stayed with you out of obligation. He used me the same way he used you. And when I realized it, I wanted you to know the truth." Emily's head spun. Her mind clung desperately to fragments of the past, anniversaries, vacations, whispered declarations of love, only to have them crumble beneath the weight of betrayal. Her perfect life was unraveling before her eyes, and she couldn't stop it. The woman's voice hardened. "Check the account he hides from you. You'll see where the money goes. Hotels. Dinners. Gifts. Not just for me, but for others too. You're not the only one he's lying to." Emily's stomach dropped. Not just one affair. Multiple. The betrayal wasn't an isolated wound, it was a web of deceit, carefully spun around her while she slept peacefully in the illusion of loyalty. She thought of the late-night calls, the hidden account, the faint perfume on his clothes. It all made sense now, and the truth cut deeper than she had imagined. "I don't want to hurt you," the woman added, her tone softening slightly. "But you deserve to know what kind of man you're married to." Emily closed the folder, her hands shaking so violently she had to press them against the table to steady herself. She wanted to walk away, to run from the cafe and pretend she had never seen the photos. But she couldn't. The images were burned into her memory, the woman's words seared into her heart. She forced herself to stand, nodding stiffly. "Thank you," she managed to say, though the words tasted like ash in her mouth. That night, back at home, Emily sat in the darkened living room, the folder on her lap. Daniel walked in late again, his smile practiced, his excuses rehearsed. He bent down to kiss her, but she turned her face away, bile rising in her throat at the thought of where his lips had been. He didn't notice, or perhaps he pretended not to. He headed upstairs, humming to himself as though nothing was wrong. Emily stared after him, her hands tightening around the folder until the edges cut into her palms. She had the proof now. The betrayal she once dismissed as paranoia laid out in photographs and bank statements. Her world had been shattered, her trust destroyed, but beneath the grief simmered something darker. For the first time, Emily felt the flicker of rage. Not the fleeting anger of an argument, but a deep, consuming fire that whispered of justice, of revenge. As the night stretched on, she realized something chilling. Daniel thought he had fooled her, thought she was still blind to his lies. But Emily wasn't blind anymore. And the man who had built his life on deception had no idea that the woman sitting quietly in the shadows was already planning how to tear it all down. The days that followed were a blur of anger, grief, and disbelief for Emily. The folder from the cafe became her constant shadow. She couldn't put it away, couldn't destroy it, couldn't even bring herself to hide it. It sat on her nightstand, its very presence a reminder of the betrayal that had hollowed out her perfect life. Every time she glanced at it, the images of Daniel's smiling face beside another woman stabbed at her like 1,000 tiny blades. She replayed the conversations they had shared, the promises he had whispered late at night, the way he had held her hand and vowed to grow old together. Each memory was now tainted, stained with the ugly truth that she had been nothing more than a prop in his carefully staged play. At first, she tried to keep the facade alive. When Daniel came home, she greeted him with the same soft smile, cooked dinner, and asked about his day. But behind her calm exterior, her eyes lingered longer, sharper, catching every flicker of hesitation in his answers. She noticed the way he avoided her gaze when he spoke of late meetings. She noticed how his phone was never out of reach, how he shielded the screen from her whenever a message buzzed through. The small cracks in their marriage, once invisible, now yawned wide, and Emily couldn't unsee them. Then came the financial statements. The mysterious woman's words had pushed her to dig deeper, and Emily knew where to look. She spent nights combing through files Daniel thought were hidden from her, piecing together the puzzle of his deceit. The hidden account was worse than she had imagined, tens of thousands of dollars siphoned off into places she didn't recognize, payments labeled under vague descriptions, wire transfers to names that weren't familiar. And there it was again, hotels, restaurants, jewelry, even rent payments for an apartment in the city. The numbers screamed betrayal, each withdrawal a silent confession of Daniel's double life. Emily sat at her desk one night, her hands gripping the edges of the papers as her chest heaved with silent sobs. It wasn't just infidelity, it was fraud. He had been using their joint resources, their shared future, to fund his lies. The savings they had built together, the sacrifices she had made in her career to support him, the dreams of vacations and children, they had all been funneled into his deceit. Her perfect life had not just unraveled, it had been stolen from her piece by piece while she looked the other way. Her fury grew sharper with each discovery. She began to see the performance for what it was, the anniversary gifts, the surprise dinners, the sweet words whispered against her skin. They were all distractions, bribes to keep her blind. She remembered the bracelet he had given her recently, how she had worn it with pride, only to realize now that it was a guilt-soaked offering, paid for with money he had stolen from her trust. The thought made her rip it off her wrist one night and hurl it across the room, the metal clattering against the wall as tears streamed down her face. The unraveling wasn't just in Emily's heart, it seeped into their home. The warmth of their dinners turned cold, their conversations brittle and forced. Daniel laughed less, avoided her eyes more, and carried an edge of irritation whenever she pressed him with questions. "I told you, work is just demanding right now," he said one evening, his tone sharper than usual. But Emily no longer heard excuses, she heard lies, layered one on top of the other until they suffocated her. She began to watch him more closely. She noticed how he dressed differently when he claimed to be working late, his shirts a little too crisp, his cologne a little too heavy. She noticed the faint lipstick smudge once on his collar, the scent of a perfume she didn't own. Each discovery was like acid eating away at her soul, yet she said nothing. Silence became her weapon, her shield. If he thought she was still blind, he would continue slipping. And the more he slipped, the more she uncovered. Emily also started to see the shift in his demeanor toward her. Daniel, once affectionate and attentive, grew cold and impatient. He snapped at her for small things, dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand, and spent more time on his phone than looking at her. At first, she thought it was guilt, but the longer it went on, the clearer it became. He wasn't just lying, he was rewriting the narrative. He was positioning himself as the victim, laying the groundwork to blame her for whatever ending he had already scripted in his mind. The realization hit Emily one evening when she overheard him on the phone, his voice low but laced with irritation. "She's starting to notice. Don't worry, I'll handle it." Her blood ran cold. The words confirmed what she had feared, he wasn't just deceiving her, he was planning for when she found out. He wasn't afraid of hurting her, he was preparing to discard her. That night, Emily sat alone in their bedroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back. The soft glow of innocence was gone, replaced by eyes that burned with fury and determination. Her perfect life was gone, her marriage nothing more than an elaborate illusion, but for the first time, she wasn't weeping. She wasn't breaking. She was calculating. The unraveling of their marriage wasn't just his doing anymore. It was also the birth of something inside her she never knew existed, a quiet, vengeful resolve that whispered, "If he thinks he can destroy me, he's about to learn just how wrong he is." The moment Emily admitted to herself that Daniel was not just unfaithful but deliberately dismantling everything they had built, something inside her shifted. The grief and despair that had consumed her for weeks began to harden into something sharper, colder. Rage was there, yes, but beneath it was a growing clarity. She realized she had two choices: crumble under the weight of his betrayal or rise from it, stronger, smarter, and far more dangerous than he could ever anticipate. That night, as Daniel slept soundly beside her, Emily lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind whirring with possibilities. Revenge was no longer an impulse, it was becoming a plan. At first, she toyed with ideas born purely from emotion, exposing him in front of their friends, throwing him out of the house, demanding every cent back. But the more she thought about it, the more she understood that these quick bursts of anger wouldn't satisfy her. Daniel had spent years weaving his web of lies. If she was going to tear it apart, she needed patience. She needed precision. She needed him to feel the same kind of devastation he had inflicted on her, slow, suffocating, and inescapable. She began quietly observing him in a new way, not as a betrayed wife desperate for answers, but as a hunter studying her prey. She noted his routines, the patterns of his lies, the times when he seemed most careless. She learned when he made his phone calls, when he slipped away for his supposed meetings, and how long he stayed gone. She memorized every detail, filing them away like ammunition she would one day use. Daniel thought he was in control, that Emily was still blind to his deceit, but he had no idea that the woman sitting across from him at the dinner table was already sharpening her weapons in silence. Her first step was information. Emily knew knowledge was power, and she intended to gather as much as she could. She revisited the hidden bank account, digging deeper into the transactions until she could trace the trails of money with alarming clarity. She copied statements, photographed receipts, and stored them in a secure folder he would never think to check. Each line of evidence was another nail in the coffin she was quietly building for him. But she didn't stop there. She began checking his emails, his calendar, even his car mileage. The pieces began to form a map of his double life, names, places, dates, and Emily collected them all like trophies. It wasn't easy to maintain the facade. Every day felt like a performance, her face a mask of calm as inside she seethed with anger. When Daniel kissed her cheek before leaving for work, she fought the urge to recoil. When he told her he loved her, she bit back the bitter retort on the tip of her tongue. But Emily was learning the art of patience, and she knew her silence was her greatest weapon. By pretending to know nothing, she was giving him the rope to hang himself with. Her friends began to notice a change in her. She smiled less, spoke less, but when they asked if something was wrong, she brushed it off with a practiced ease. She couldn't tell anyone, not yet. This was hers to handle, hers to control. She wasn't ready to expose Daniel until she had every card stacked in her favor. She wasn't interested in sympathy, she wanted victory. Late at night, when she was alone, Emily would sit at her desk with a notebook in hand, writing down every possible way she could strike back. She envisioned scenarios where Daniel lost everything, his reputation, his money, his comfort, his pride. She imagined the look on his face when he realized that the woman he thought was powerless had been quietly plotting his downfall. These thoughts became her fuel, her anchor. They kept her steady on the days when despair threatened to creep back in. And as she built her plan, she began to change. Emily no longer saw herself as the broken wife, the victim of betrayal. She started to carry herself differently, her shoulders straighter, her eyes sharper. There was a new edge to her that even Daniel noticed. "You seem different lately," he remarked one evening, studying her face. Emily forced a smile, her heart pounding with the thrill of her secret. "Just tired," she said softly, hiding the storm brewing inside her. What Daniel didn't know was that Emily's silence was no longer submission, it was strategy. She was done mourning the life she had lost. Now, every smile she gave him, every gentle word she spoke, was a calculated move. Every secret she uncovered was another step toward the reckoning she was preparing. The perfect wife he thought he controlled was gone. In her place was a woman forged by betrayal, armed with patience, and ready to strike when the time was right. Emily's plan had been simmering for weeks, each piece of evidence neatly tucked away like a weapon waiting for its moment. But now, she was ready to move from collecting to executing. Revenge wasn't just a thought anymore, it was action. Every breath she took, every step she made, was guided by a chilling clarity. Daniel would be destroyed not through rage or chaos, but through his own lies, laid bare in a way he could never escape. She started by tightening her grip on his digital trail. Every suspicious email, every transfer to the hidden bank account, every secret calendar entry, Emily copied them all onto an encrypted drive only she could access. But she wasn't content with just having proof, she wanted irrefutable evidence, the kind that would crush his denials before they even left his lips. So she set traps, subtle at first. She left her phone recording in the car when he borrowed it for work meetings. She installed a tiny camera in their home office under the guise of extra security. She even intercepted his mail, carefully steaming envelopes open and resealing them without a trace. Slowly, the puzzle of his double life came into focus. And then came the night she followed him. It wasn't like the movies, no trench coat or sunglasses, just Emily in her own car, gripping the steering wheel as she trailed Daniel's black sedan through the city streets. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to breathe evenly, to keep distance, to remain invisible. When he finally pulled into the driveway of a suburban house she had never seen before, Emily's stomach turned cold. She watched as he stepped out of the car, loosened his tie, and walked casually to the door. When it opened, a woman greeted him, not just with a smile, but with an embrace, one far too intimate to be mistaken. Emily didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply raised her phone and began to record. The truth was now undeniable, and she had it all in her hands. Back at home, she reviewed the footage over and over, the images searing into her mind. But instead of breaking her, it strengthened her resolve. She compiled the recordings, the financial documents, the screenshots of text messages she had siphoned from his cloud backup into a single, devastating portfolio. With each file, she labeled and time-stamped, ensuring nothing could be questioned. This wasn't revenge born of hysteria, it was meticulous, calculated, and irrefutable. But Emily wasn't done. She wanted Daniel to feel the humiliation, the collapse of control, the panic of having nowhere to hide. So she began to plan the stage for her grand reveal. She didn't want a private confrontation. No, that would be too merciful. Daniel had flaunted his lies in the shadows, but Emily would drag them into the light. She chose their wedding anniversary dinner as the perfect occasion. Every year, Daniel insisted on a lavish evening, surrounded by friends and colleagues, showing off their perfect marriage like a trophy. This year, Emily agreed without hesitation, her smile hiding the storm behind her lips. She booked the venue, sent out the invitations, and played her part as the loving wife preparing for a special night. What Daniel didn't know was that Emily had already arranged for a projector, a neatly hidden USB drive, and a presentation that would expose his double life in front of everyone he valued. Every lie, every secret, every betrayal, laid bare on a screen for his friends, his family, his co-workers, and most importantly, his mistress, whom Emily had made sure would be invited under the guise of a surprise guest. The days leading up to the dinner were almost unbearable, the anticipation gnawing at Emily's nerves. But she disguised it with practiced ease, serving him coffee in the morning, kissing his cheek as he left for work, laughing at his jokes as though nothing had changed. Inside, however, she was coiled like a snake, waiting for the exact moment to strike. Finally, the night arrived. The guests mingled, glasses clinked, laughter filled the air, and Daniel basked in the glow of admiration as he always did. He had no idea the walls of his perfect illusion were about to crumble. Emily stood by his side, the very picture of devotion, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her smile serene. Only she knew that in a matter of minutes, his world would implode. When the time came for Daniel's customary toast, Emily excused herself quietly, slipping to the back where the projector was set up. As he raised his glass and spoke about loyalty, love, and the strength of their marriage, Emily pressed a button. The room fell silent as the first image flashed across the screen. Daniel in the arms of another woman. Then came the bank transfers, the text messages, the late-night phone calls, all scrolling one after another in damning sequence. Gasps echoed through the hall, guests whispering in shock, eyes darting between Daniel and the evidence playing out before them. Emily didn't need to say a word. The files spoke for her, each slide another knife twisting into Daniel's carefully constructed facade. His face drained of color, his confident smile crumbling as the crowd turned against him. The mistress, seated among the guests, looked mortified as her own messages appeared for everyone to read. Daniel stammered, tried to object, but Emily had crafted the evidence too well, timed it too perfectly. There was no escape. In that moment, as Daniel's empire of lies collapsed in front of the very people he sought to impress, Emily felt no guilt. Only justice. He had stolen years of her life, shattered her trust, and treated her love like a pawn in his game. Now, with the truth exposed and his reputation in ruins, he was finally tasting the humiliation he had so easily served to her. And this was only the beginning of what she had planned. As the final slide of Daniel's betrayal lingered on the screen, silence consumed the room. The weight of truth pressed down on everyone present, suffocating the once celebratory atmosphere. Emily stood still, her face calm, almost serene, as if she had rehearsed this moment in her mind 1,000 times. And in many ways, she had. This was her reckoning, her justice, the exact point where the perfect illusion Daniel had built shattered beyond repair. Gasps turned into murmurs, murmurs into whispers, and whispers into judgmental stares, all aimed at Daniel. He stumbled over his words, tried to laugh it off, even attempted to cast Emily as paranoid or manipulative. But the evidence, time-stamped receipts, explicit text messages, photographs of his late-night visits, was undeniable. The very betrayal that once had broken Emily into pieces now stood as the most powerful weapon she wielded against him. And it was cutting him down in front of everyone he thought he controlled. Daniel's colleagues whispered about fraud. His parents sat in stunned silence, unable to defend their son. Friends who had once admired him now recoiled in disgust. Even the mistress, who had been complicit in his deception, avoided his gaze, humiliated by the exposure. Emily didn't raise her voice, didn't lash out. She didn't need to. Her silence, her composure, spoke louder than any scream could. Daniel's empire of lies was crumbling, and she was simply letting gravity do the work. But Emily wasn't satisfied with just public humiliation. She had prepared the second layer of her plan, the one that would ensure his downfall extended beyond reputation. Weeks before, she had quietly shared copies of the financial records with legal authorities. Proof of tax evasion, offshore accounts, and money siphoned into fraudulent ventures. What Daniel had thought was hidden under careful planning had already been placed in the hands of those who could dismantle him legally. Tonight was just the overture, the true consequences were still on their way. As the projector clicked off and the lights came back on, Daniel turned to Emily with a look of desperation, a man who suddenly realized the extent of his ruin. "Why would you do this?" he whispered, his voice cracking. Emily met his eyes with a calm fierceness that startled him. "Because you thought I was weak," she replied softly, just loud enough for those nearest to hear. "You thought I'd break. But you forgot, I was watching, and I learned from you. The betrayal that destroyed me is the very thing I used to destroy you." The guests began to leave, some avoiding Daniel entirely, others muttering cold remarks as they passed him. His carefully curated image of the devoted husband, the successful businessman, the charming friend, it was gone. All that remained was a hollow man exposed in front of everyone who mattered. Emily, on the other hand, stood tall, her shoulders squared, her eyes steady. For the first time in years, she felt like she owned her life again. In the days that followed, the fallout spread like wildfire. Word of Daniel's double life and financial crimes traveled quickly through their social and professional circles. Business deals were cancelled, friends abandoned him, and his mistress disappeared without a trace, unwilling to share in his downfall. Soon after, the legal consequences arrived, frozen accounts, pending investigations, and the looming shadow of charges that would strip him of everything he had fought to hoard in secrecy. Emily, however, moved with precision. She filed for divorce, her attorney armed with the mountain of evidence she had collected. Every asset, every account, every hidden investment, she had already mapped them out. Daniel, cornered and powerless, could no longer manipulate the narrative. The same lies he once used as his shield now served as her sword, carving through his defenses until nothing was left. And through it all, Emily didn't collapse. She didn't retreat into the shadows. Instead, she began to rebuild. She reconnected with the passions she had abandoned for Daniel's ambitions. She poured her time into friendships she had once neglected, rediscovered hobbies that brought her joy, and focused on creating a life not defined by betrayal but by resilience. Yet, no matter how much she healed, one truth remained: Daniel's betrayal had been the turning point. It had nearly destroyed her, yes, but in its ashes, she had found a strength she never knew she possessed. The lie that unraveled everything had also revealed the truth about herself. She was not fragile, not powerless, not defined by anyone else's choices. She was sharp, unyielding, and capable of wielding the very pain he had given her into the most devastating form of justice. On a quiet evening weeks after the anniversary dinner, Emily sat by her window, sipping tea as the city lights flickered outside. She thought of the life she once believed was perfect, the love she thought was unshakable, and the man she thought she knew. All of it had been a lie. But instead of mourning, she felt a strange sense of gratitude. Daniel's betrayal had stripped away the illusion and, in doing so, freed her from it. The perfect life she thought she had was nothing but a lie. But in the end, that lie had given her the power to destroy the man who built it, and to rise from its ruin stronger than she had ever been.